how is this unconsciously benefiting me?
People pleasing can be unconsciously motivated by what needs are going to be met. If I always put myself last, will I be the person that everybody likes? If I always pay for everything when I go out with my friends, will I be the most loved?
If that's the case, then there's a whole internal world that starts to develop to cope if I can't escape the environment.
Listen to the words. Listen to the phrasing. You did such a good job.
Yeah.
You pleased me.
Back to the vulnerable narcissism, because we can also paint the picture of how the vulnerable narcissist, it was a role at first to survive that family dynamics. We don't consciously want to keep repeating those patterns. But oftentimes, if we want to change something, we have to really recognize there is some benefit on some level that's usually unconscious. And that's to take the distraction from whatever is happening over here. Hey everyone, we're back today and coming back to you and following up with our last podcast talking about the vulnerable narcissist.
Yes, and we also touched a little bit on destructive entitlement and how those two go hand in hand. And we're here to dive right into part 2. I'm Dr. Kian.
And I am Gail Dargle. What's your last name, Gail? Yes. So as always, we'd like to go ahead and set the intention for our session today. What do you want, Dr. Kian, for people to come away with or experience?
I think, we were kind of talking about earlier, I think the idea of being more aware of our patterns. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people can grasp, right? A lot of people can, maybe they don't understand the technical terminology and all the, different ways in which we pathologize or categorize. But just the idea of, okay, what are my patterns? What is the loop happening in my brain? What is the way my nervous system learned to survive? And so I really want our viewers to walk away with more understanding of their patterns.
I love that. And I feel like we always play off of each other.
Yeah.
One of the words that came up for me when I was hearing you talk about that is our reenactment. Usually we're reenacting something that has been playing out or has played out in other areas of our life, other seasons of our life, if that's childhood, early adolescence, college years, but specifically relationally. So what's the dynamic that continues to be perpetuated? And with having that awareness, we can pause and reflect and see why. Like what's unconsciously, how is this unconsciously benefiting me? And I know that might sound kind of odd when we think about it, but because a lot of times we don't consciously want to keep repeating those patterns. Typically, people come into therapy and they say, I want to change this, or I'm noticing this. But oftentimes, if we want to change something, we have to really recognize there is some benefit on some level that's usually unconscious.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Where do you go when you hear that?
Well, when we think about the benefit, right, it's like, I think when we go into like the idea of people pleasing, for example, right? People pleasing can be unconsciously motivated by what needs are going to be met, right? If I always put myself last, will I be the person that everybody likes? If I always pay for everything when I go out with my friends, will I be the most loved? And so when we really think about that, that's not void of an agenda, even if it's rooted in survival. Right. It's not like, okay, you had this plan and you're so manipulative. No, it's deeply unconscious in many cases, and it's also, how did we learn to survive? What did we learn to strive for that we are lacking?
And so much of when I hear you, there's so many things that come up. I think about being seen.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
Like
so true. Yes.
being seen under the guise of being a good person
Mm.
is
Yes.
safer than being seen for who you really are.
The good boy, the good girl, like that good child.
Sweetheart. What a sweetheart. What a kind and sweet person they are, right? Like,
Yes.
that is great, but also, is that you?
Right. Where is the authentic self, right? Because, you know, if the authentic self is hiding underneath, what is it hiding underneath?
And so many times people don't even recognize that they're hiding. And that's why it's really
Exactly.
beneficial for us to look at what we call secondary gains. And those secondary gains are those unconscious gains that we're getting that continue to perpetuate the same behavior, right? So unconsciously, if we're looking at people pleasers, like Dr. Kian was saying, they're going to be getting, I almost think about like there's like money in the bank every time. Ding, ding. Every time
Yes.
somebody says, oh my God, that was so thoughtful of you. Oh my God, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's money in the bank to their sense of self, to their identity.
Absolutely.
So those would be the secondary gains. So when we're looking at changing things, you're kind of asking somebody to really give up some of the things that have been potentially building them up, if that makes sense.
1,000%. I think also when you're saying secondary gains, I also think about like it's building them up, and it's also keeping them safe. It's like both at the same time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like
yes.
we don't want to forget about the part that is building them up, right? Because sometimes when we think about people pleasing, a lot of people don't think about it in the framework of what am I getting out of this, right? It's how am I surviving?
Right.
And I know as someone who has, you know, struggled with that pattern and has been in recovery from it, it's really just that constant wanting to sustain intimacy and closeness for safety, right? So if we don't pay for our friend, or we upset our coworker, or if there's a dynamic that's off where our safety kind of goes a little bit over, right? And we're about to lose it. How are we going to maintain that to get it back, right? And for some people that grew up with inconsistency in their childhood with their parents or early caregivers, their brain learned, like they're kind of playing at a slot machine, there was intermittent reinforcement, right? So sometimes we're going to win, sometimes we're going to get the intimacy, and sometimes we're going to get rejection, or we're going to get neglect, or we're going to get even abuse. And that is highly addictive to the brain. And so that pattern does not stop. As we grow into adulthood, we are in the same pattern, the same structure, and it's just looping in the brain. This is how we stay safe. And when we deviate from that, the brain says, no, go back to the old pattern. This is the pattern that ensures your safety.
It's almost like when we think safety and benefit, so safety and identity, one begets the other. More than likely, it started with safety, survival first, and then, oh, here's the benefit. Oh, here's the benefit. Oh, here's the benefit, if that makes sense. And so that, you know, as Dr. Kim was saying, it's that reinforcement, and then we're going to move over to that reenactment. So this is a behavior that's become reinforced, but it's also the rules of engagement. So one of the things when I'm first working with my clients, those are some of the first couple sessions. It's what are your rules? What are the unspoken rules that you learn to live by? And what are your emotion and your roles? So rules and roles. And what are the rules around emotions? And so a lot of times those rules are usually what were created to keep somebody safe and surviving, but also I might add, I know we're using the word safety and survival, but if we get into the minutia of it, I think it's really to navigate the family system. This is how the family operates. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. A lot of times that's very unconscious.
Yes.
So those are the same reenactments that you start to do later on in other relationships, unconsciously in relationships, because that's what you do. That's what's been wired in your brain to do. Those are the rules.
And that's like such a good point to bring up, right? Because we have people that are like the family jester, right? Where they're making jokes. You see a lot of comedians, right? They are performing for the parent that was depressed, right? And so it's like, what did they do to survive in that environment? Maybe they were raised by parents who had this depression or felt down, and the child then grew to have a compulsion, right? To entertain, right? How am I going to get the parent out of the depression? I'm going to pull them out of the depression with my comedy.
Let's go over some of these roles, because I think that I love where you're going with this. We also have the scapegoat, which I think is such an interesting role and a painful role for individuals to be in, because sometimes the scapegoat can be birthed out of a lot of different experiences. One of the one I find the most common is when there is a constant rupture between the parent dyad. So when two parents are struggling, the child then becomes what we call the IP, the identified patient, and they're the ones that are causing all the issues. Because if the family can put all of that energy and that attention on this person being the real problem, we can't look at what's actually deteriorating, which is oftentimes the relationship and the marriage. Right? So, but all the conversations continue to be talked about somebody, but it's not the right person. And so this person continues to get reinforced, and they have a whole narrative in their head that gets reinforced as, I'm always the problem. Let's see, it's my fault. It's my fault. Yeah, it's my fault. I'm not good enough. What's another one? I'm never going to be accepted, potentially.
I'm not going to make them proud enough.
Right. So that's one role. Let's just go through some of the roles, and then we'll jump back to the vulnerable narcissism, because I think we can also paint the picture of how the vulnerable narcissist became one of those. It was a role at first to survive that family dynamic. So let's keep moving. So we have scapegoat, we have gesture, clown.
Right. I'm trying to think of the other ones. I'm not really...
Family hero.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Right? And that's to take the distraction from whatever is happening over here to... and I was a family hero. I know this one really well. Right? If you exceed really well and you do really well, then nobody else is going to see what else is going on in the family.
Right.
And it's also a way to be seen, right? So you're the family hero that either comes in and solves all the situations or distracts. So we have a lot of distractors, right, in the family system that are keeping the family from actually looking at what's the real issue here.
And that productivity with the family hero, right, comes to mind. It's like...
Yes, that's
like,
it.
I'm going to be productive and therefore I'm safe, right? This is why, like, when you're with if you have children, right? And if you're one of our listeners and you have kids, one thing that's really important is when you're talking to your child, and let's say they did some artwork for you, instead of saying like, oh, you made me so proud, right? You colored in the lines, you did such a great job. Right? Listen to the words. Listen to the phrasing. You did such a good job.
Yeah.
You pleased me with how productive you were or how good you were.
How perfect you were.
We can shift that so much on its head, right? We have the power as parents to really focus on the creativity aspect, right? Like to your son or daughter, your child, right? I'm so happy to see your talents coming out here.
Yeah.
Right? I love that you were able to express this emotion in this part of the painting. Yeah. Right? I love that you really like red. That's so cool. Right? Tell me more about why you like red. We're shifting that narrative away from productivity and into emotional intelligence.
I love that. And I love going into what that says to the child, right? Because, and let's also be real, as parents, there's so much time that is dedicated to so many things, and taking that extra 15 seconds
absolutely,
to just lean in and go, oh my gosh, you used red. I know you use red because red's your favorite color. You love red, huh? What about this one? Look at this. You don't even have to say a ton. You don't even have to say a ton. And part of what I just did right there is my affect.
Yes.
Affect affects co-regulation. So you can help co-regulate your little one with, oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? That changes the way the person's emotionally responding. We can literally upregulate or downregulate someone with our voices.
Such a good point, right? And tracking someone's voice, right?
Yes.
This is where we get the hypervigilance when a child is in trauma, right? They're trying to see, when am I going to get that next hit of what you just described?
Right.
That affect is like oxygen to a child when they feel unsafe and they're looking for that safety.
Right. It's you see me. You see all of me, and you can do it with your voice. So we don't always have to have a ton of time or do a ton of things. It can quite simply be, oh my gosh, look at this shirt. Yeah. This is great. When we can give full focus, Dr. Can's like, leave it alone.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding.
Oh,
no. But like just like fully peering in to something, that attention. Let's shift over and let's talk about, how does the vulnerable narcissism, how does that fit in? How does that grow? What's the family dynamic we might see, or what's the role we might see somebody playing? So we have the family hero, we have the enabler, the chief enabler, that might be a little similar to the people pleaser potentially. The chief enabler would rather reduce the stress and give people what they want in order for things to just go back to normal. We have now I'm thinking about kind of the more substance use family dynamics. We have what they would call the victim.
Yeah.
Which
aligns,
right? That checks out.
Yeah.
Is everything is happening to me, and I have no responsibility in this. These are all things happening to me. So it's an external locus of control with the world. And
wonderfully said. Yeah.
We have the scapegoat. We have the clown. So those would be, or the gesture, as Dr. Keen had mentioned.
Yeah, I mean that idea, right, of entertaining, and just when we look at the functions in these roles, we're really looking at, how did I survive in my family system? What was required of me to make it through, right? Because as children, as we're developing and growing up, we do not have the cynicism to say, fuck this, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't have access to, funds to like check into a hotel and be like, bye, I'm going to bounce, right? No, that's not how it works, right? So we have to learn to endure. And where is it that we endure the most is in how we shapeshift or contort in order to survive the environment we're in.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you.
Well said. Yeah. One of the things that I think about is shapeshift in how I'm presenting with other people, contort in how I'm presenting, but also the internalization.
Yes.
Right? Because my body has to walk through all of these experiences, because I can't say fuck this and get a hotel. Right? I'm going to pack my bag and I'm going to run away to grandma's house. Wait, I don't remember how to get there. Okay.
Right. And I need you to drive me.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then there's a whole internal world that starts to develop to cope if I can't escape the environment. And it's that internal world that starts to create these functions.
And living in that world is where we depart from reality. When we go into fantasy, and fantasy becomes the space where we feel most safe most in control, right? We see this where, you know, children, when they grow up in environments that are very toxic, very unsafe, full of neglect and abuse and violence, right? And stripping them of their autonomy. We see them enter into fantasy worlds and stay in those worlds because those worlds are preferred over the real world, right? And when our reality is not being reflected back to us by the parent, by the caregiver, by the one who has kind of defined our reality as we know it.
Oh, yes.
We become extremely vulnerable to narcissistic abuse because the minute we stop defining our own reality is the minute they start defining everything, right? The narcissist. And so when we're thinking about like how much power am I giving, a lot of the time it's unconscious. A lot of the time it's not part of, you know, even what we're thinking about. It's just, here's the role. Here's what I step into. This is what keeps me safe. Here's what I did in the family structure. And now I'm playing out that same role in this other dynamic.
Yeah, it's funny. When you're talking about it, I almost get the visual. Have you ever walked into a room where there's, like, it's either really hot outside and there's a ton of air when you walk in, and so the door's open and it's just, it's like a gust of wind. And it is quite literally just an automatic response that you can't control. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think about that scene from Wicked with Elphaba and Glinda.
Yeah, which one?
Because they're at the window and and Elphaba and like her are in the room, and then she opens the window to get some air, and then, you know, you see that Elphaba like cracks the entire window, and it's it's very much like a representation of what's happening internally. And I think when we think about the fantasy world, a lot of us have this internal fantasy world that we've built up. And then as we become adults, why would we want to give that up? Why would we want to lose the fantasy world? If the fantasy world was most comfortable, most safe, right? Why would we ever walk away from it? And this is part of that fantasy. When we go to the victim mentality, I've always been the victim. And if I don't stay in that, then who am I?
Well, it's very similar to what we were talking about with the people-pleasing, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like reverse engineering the people-pleasing and saying the same thing. What's the benefit? One, how did it keep this person safe to be the victim? So just like with the people-pleaser, it started with safety and survival. And then we saw that the secondary gains for the people-pleaser was identity formation.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to be seen as this. I'm going to be I'm going to be respected. I'm going to be loved. People aren't going to leave, whatever that is, right? But now for this victim mentality, right? It's we see where it's pouring into the identity, which is let's break this down a little bit in the same way that we broke people pleasing down. What's the safety? How would it benefit a person from being that victim?
Yeah.
I think of like, please stop. This is too much. I can't handle anymore.
Right.
I don't have the capacity. If I show that I'm out and I'm weak and I can't handle this, then you'll let up.
Absolutely.
One way that I think about that.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good way of like breaking it down and describing it, right? Because when we do think about the victim mentality, it then goes back to what was the pattern that was learned and why was it learned? And why is it unsafe to leave, right? So the pattern that was learned as a victim is that if I keep that mentality, and let's say I have destructive entitlement along with it, which is the world owes me something, right? Not only is my pain the biggest pain in the room, but also the world owes me something. So that destructive entitlement and vulnerable narcissism comes from being in that fantasy world where that was the only way to survive, right? And there have been a lot of cases where someone navigating those patterns has been in so much pain and has had to suffer losing themselves, right? As a way to survive the environment. And like you were saying earlier, there's a lot of output and that safety is still not there. So then the person turns inward.
I think about a split. There being a split in the self.
Yes.
There's the self that exists in this reality, and then there's the self that exists in the depersonalized reality. And that's going to be really hard for anybody to connect to them, or for them to ever allow anybody in to connect to them.
Yeah. Right. Because if I allow you vulnerability into my world, right, that world was created to protect me. So I'm very careful about who I let in there. And that means, right, that I'm protecting the narrative and the stories that keep me in the role that made me the most safe. And if that role was to be the victim, and I got things, handed to me, or I was taken care of because I was always playing weak, my pain was always the biggest pain in the room, then why would I shift that if I never have to acknowledge what's underneath?
I also feel like there would be a fear to go to what's underneath.
Absolutely.
This is going to be a lot safer to present to the world, but also to self.
Yes.
It's a lot easier to stay up here than to say, well, because there's nothing underneath.
Right.
The thing that you're trying to look at, I don't actually have that. Because I had to split from self, and that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's very true.
Like, there's a void in here that I don't even know how to even access.
Right. And then I feel defective if I try to access it.
And then what do I do?
Right. Push away.
If you're asking for something that I can't access, then...
Oh, 1,000%. And then I think about, like, when someone allows you into their internal world, that is vulnerability. Right? When someone has had a narrative of themselves in, let's say, the victim role, letting you into their world is essentially letting you into their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that has not been safe historically for them.
It hasn't.
In many cases.
And that's tricky. That's really difficult to navigate because now you're in their world, which they may have allowed very few people in.
Right.
And that's going to be difficult for anybody that's on the other side of that.
Oh, yes, the pressure, right? To live up to the expectations, to not let them down. Yes.
This is something we were talking about in our last episode was having to constantly prove loyalty, prove trust. And so that's going to work really well for a people pleaser because it reinforces that same narrative that we were talking about earlier, that previous reenactment from episode 2 of I need to be seen by you and my role is to regulate you. So if I'm regulating you, which is what the vulnerable narcissist needs, is somebody to be proving and regulating them all the time, then those two work really, I don't want to say well, but usually they're attracted to each other. But then you're going to get the people pleaser that's now stuck in this position where there is only one route, and that's to keep pleasing, or I should say 2 routes, or to start to set some boundary work. And that can be really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
For both parties.
What would you say are some of the things that make it difficult?
I think the personal responsibility.
Yeah.
I think because when you're working with when you're working with somebody that has the vulnerable narcissistic traits, then you do feel like you are personally responsible for them because that's how they have made you feel.
Yes.
That's the position that they have put you in. If that's that you become more of their parent, if you become whatever role they've put you in, now how do I not self-erase and be present in this dynamic? Usually that doesn't equate to being safe for the vulnerable narcissist, because if they're not in the lead or driving
Yes.
with their pain,
Mm-hmm.
then you are now a danger to them.
Exactly. Then the amygdala lights up and this is a threat.
Yes.
And I think it's so great that we're highlighting, these different aspects of individuals who have these patterns. I think I also want to add that going back to the nuance of it is that, all of these patterns are on a spectrum.
Yes.
And we're looking at how much does this impact the person's daily life?
Mm-hmm.
How much does this get in the way of their sense of self? What level at which, if we categorize this as dysfunction, what level is it impacting them?
Mm-hmm.
On a scale of, 0 to 100, what number is it at? Because
Right.
we also want to talk about the getting out of the black and white thinking and acknowledging that, there is possibility of change with long-term support and with the brain getting repetition, right, of a different pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what's really encouraging about that, is that there's an ability for some people to make change in the patterns that have kept them safe. And in other people, it's very challenging, right? And so we want to be mindful of that too.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes if you have somebody that's on a 90 out of 100, right, their ability to self-reflect, their ability to look at the patterns and have even metacognition, which we can talk about next week,
Mm-hmm.
but really that idea of like stepping outside of the prefrontal cortex and asking questions that are deeper. Like, why do I act the way that I do? What conditioned me to act this way? Rather than just accepting it as truth, those people will be able to make changes accordingly or not.
And that's why we highlight the metacognition so much. That's why we're kind of always dancing around something in a way. It's to illuminate and to orbit around.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of fixating on the cup, we're illuminating the different angles of the cup.
Yes.
And so this is there it's to the left depending on where I'm looking at it, or it's going to be to the right depending on what direction. And we're studying the more full distal perspective of it.
Absolutely.
So the distal perspective allows for improvement, allows for more regulation, right? Because I'm not so connected to the outcome of whatever I think I'm staring at. Just like if I were to bring this back to the family system, in grad school we learned the problem is never the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
yes.
yeah, it is creating a problematic experience, but more than likely there's something underneath it. And so really building that skill out of being able to peer out and around and create a mindful perspective is something that I feel really lucky that we both take quite often. And so it really does kind of complement these conversations. And that's why we always push for awareness.
Exactly. And I feel like the way that you're breaking that down is so easy to understand, right? And just to look at. And when we're looking at the cup, we're looking at different sides of it.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the quote, healthy people are dysfunctional healthy people are symptomatic in dysfunctional environments, right? And so we're looking at like, there are people, right, that have been, in patterns as a result of the dysfunctional environments that they've been in, and those have been their nervous system survival adaptations to survive the moment. Yes. And as Dr. Frank Anderson talks about, right, we lose our ability to control ourselves and our emotional regulation when we're in a heightened state and the body is responding to the past, right? And so when people are able to think about that and really let that sink in and think about what that means for change, we can come at it after we've taken a breather, have a different conversation, when we're not as activated, right? And then sit with that idea. Healthy people are symptomatic in dysfunctional environments.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's good. Alrighty, y'all. I think we're here.
I think it's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We are excited to dive in next meeting, next episode.
Next session.
Next session, yeah. And we'll continue on this framework of vulnerable narcissism and destructive entitlement. And also we're going to start pivoting over to the other types of narcissism as we go through this series. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Bye.